Captain Ryan Hayes stood at the entrance of the alien space station, gazing at the immense structure ahead of him. The station floated silently in the cold vacuum of space, its exterior sleek and dark, a sharp contrast to the stars that dotted the heavens. It was a place that had witnessed the rise of the Zephyrians, a species that had ruled vast stretches of the galaxy for centuries. The reputation of the Zephyrian Empire was one of power and conquest. Their people feared across the stars, their influence extending to worlds unknown. Yet here he was, a young human soldier about to enter the heart of their domain, a mission to meet their queen. Ryan adjusted the straps on his uniform, ensuring that his equipment was secure. He wasn't sure what awaited him on this mission, but one thing was certain: this wasn't going to be easy. Humanity had been at peace with the Zephyrians for decades, a fragile peace that seemed to hang by a thread. But with tensions growing between the two species, Ryan was part of a small team sent to assess the situation and determine if the peace could be preserved, or if war was inevitable. He walked down the narrow corridor of the space station, his footsteps echoing off the metal floors. The walls were lined with strange alien symbols, illuminated by soft blue light. Ryan had been trained for situations like this, but nothing could prepare him for what he was about to encounter. The Zephyrians were known for their intelligence and their ruthlessness. Their queen, especially, was infamous for her cunning mind and her icy demeanor. She had never been seen in person by a human, but her reputation preceded her. No one dared challenge her authority. As he approached the central chamber, Ryan's heart beat faster. The door slid open silently, revealing a grand hall, far larger than any human structure he had ever seen. In the center of the room, seated on a throne made of what appeared to be a combination of organic material and advanced technology, was the Zephyrian queen. She was a sight to behold, yet nothing like he had imagined. Her skin was a deep shade of purple, almost black in some places, with intricate patterns of iridescent scales that shimmered as she moved. Her eyes glowed with a piercing, unnatural light, casting an eerie glow across the room. Her forearms were long and muscular, each ending in sharp, claw-like fingers. She was not beautiful, at least not in the way humans defined beauty. Her features were harsh, sharp, and intimidating, yet there was an undeniable presence about her, one that radiated power and intelligence. Ryan stood still for a moment, taking in the sight of her, not sure if he should bow, salute, or simply wait for her to speak. She turned her head slowly, her glowing eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him feel as if she could see right through him. "I'm not beautiful, I'm ugly," the queen said, her voice cold and emotionless. It was a statement, not a question. Her words hung in the air, almost daring Ryan to disagree, yet there was no hint of insecurity in her tone. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had long accepted her appearance as irrelevant to her power. Ryan blinked, unsure of how to respond. The words weren't what he had expected, but they intrigued him. Despite her fearsome appearance, the queen seemed almost detached from the concept of beauty altogether. She wasn't looking for validation or admiration. She was stating a fact, one that seemed to carry little weight in her mind. "You're right," Ryan finally said, his voice steady, "but to me, strength is beautiful." The queen raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by his response. She studied him for a long moment, her gaze never leaving his face. Ryan stood his ground, meeting her eyes with a mixture of respect and defiance. He knew he had to make a good impression, but more than that, he needed to show the queen that humanity wasn't just about physical appearances. It was about resilience, intelligence, and the will to survive, and he intended to prove that. The queen leaned forward slightly, her sharp claws clicking against the throne as she moved. "Strength," she repeated, her tone skeptical. "Do you think your species is strong, human, strong enough to stand against the might of the Zephyrian Empire?" Ryan didn't hesitate. "We're not as strong as your empire, but we're not weak either. Humans have survived because we adapt. We find ways to outsmart our enemies, to outlast them. Strength isn't just about power, it's about determination." The queen was silent for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she considered his words. Ryan could sense that she was intrigued, but he wasn't sure if it was out of respect or simply curiosity. Regardless, he had made his point. The Zephyrians valued strength, but they were not accustomed to seeing it in the form of intellectual resilience. "I've heard stories about your species," the queen finally said. "Stories of your persistence, your refusal to surrender, but that does not make you strong human. It makes you stubborn, Ryan smiled despite himself. Sometimes stubbornness is what keeps you alive. The Queen's lips curled slightly, a faint hint of amusement crossing her otherwise expressionless face. "We shall see, Captain Hayes," she said, standing up from her throne with a fluid motion. "Your strength will be tested. If you wish to prove that humans are more than just survivors, you will have to show me, and I will be the one to decide if you are worthy of my respect." Ryan's heart raced, but he didn't let it show. He had expected this. The Queen wasn't going to hand over her respect easily, but that was fine. He wasn't here to beg for it. He was here to show her that humanity had something the Zephyrians didn't, the ability to think beyond brute force. "Test me however you wish," Ryan said, his voice steady. "I'm ready." The Queen's eyes flickered with something that could almost be described as amusement, though it was hard to tell. "Very well," she said. "But be warned, human, I do not test those I do not deem worthy." With a flick of her wrist, she motioned for Ryan to follow her. She led him through the long corridors of the space station, and for the first time, Ryan couldn't help but notice how everything seemed to be designed with a singular purpose: efficiency. There were no extravagant decorations, no wasted space. The Zephyrians didn't care about luxury or comfort. They cared about strength, about function. They arrived at a large chamber, one unlike any Ryan had ever seen before. It was a training room, but not like the ones back on Earth. Here, there were no weapons, no armor. Instead, the room was filled with obstacles, strange devices that seemed to move on their own, shifting and adjusting in response to anyone who entered. "This is the gauntlet," the Queen said, her voice carrying a note of finality. "It is a test of endurance, intellect, and adaptability. You will face challenges unlike any you've encountered. Fail, and you will leave this place in disgrace. Succeed, and you will have earned my respect." Ryan took a deep breath, his mind already calculating the best approach. The gauntlet was not just about brute strength. It was about strategy, about using his mind to overcome obstacles. This was where humanity's true strength would shine. As the doors to the chamber closed behind him, Ryan stepped forward. The gauntlet had begun. Ryan stood in the center of the gauntlet, a vast, darkened room filled with strange, moving obstacles. The floor beneath him was made of metallic panels that hummed softly, while above, the ceiling shimmered with a bluish glow. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, and the distant hum of machinery echoed off the walls. This was no ordinary training room. It was a test of everything a person could endure, mentally, physically, and emotionally. He had heard the stories about the Zephyrian gauntlet. Those who failed were humiliated, those who succeeded were revered. He wasn't sure which path he would walk, but one thing was certain: he was determined to make it through. The Queen's voice came over a loudspeaker, cold and distant. "You will face a series of challenges, human. Each one will test a different aspect of your nature. Some will require strength, others intelligence, and some will challenge your very will to survive. Fail to complete any challenge, and you will be removed from this station in disgrace. Succeed, and you may earn my respect." Ryan's hands clenched into fists, his heart pounding. There was no turning back now. He knew this wasn't just about physical strength, it was about proving humanity's worth. The Zephyrians valued intellect, but they also respected toughness. He had to show them that humans weren't just survivors. They were warriors in their own right, capable of overcoming any obstacle, no matter how impossible it seemed. The first challenge began with a loud clanking noise from the walls. Metal plates shifted, and the ground under Ryan's feet rumbled. From the far side of the room, a massive mechanical beast emerged, its eyes glowing red, its claws scraping against the floor as it moved toward him. Ryan didn't hesitate. He had no choice but to fight. This was the first test, a test of strength. The creature was enormous, its body covered in thick metallic armor. Its legs were like massive pillars, each one built for power. It lunged at Ryan with terrifying speed, and for a moment he thought he might not be fast enough to avoid it. But his instincts kicked in. He dove to the side, just barely dodging the creature's claws as they swiped at the spot where he had been standing. The creature roared, its sound deafening in the small room, and charged again. Ryan's mind raced as he rolled to his feet. He had been trained in combat, but this was different. He wasn't facing another human. He was up against something that didn't think, didn't feel. It just followed its programming. He needed to outsmart it. The creature lunged again, its jaws snapping shut just inches from Ryan's face. He ducked and slid underneath it, coming up behind the creature. It turned, its massive head swinging around to follow him. But Ryan was already on the move. He grabbed a loose metal pipe from the ground, swung it up, and struck the creature's exposed side. The blow didn't penetrate the thick armor, but it made the creature stumble, throwing it off balance for just a moment. That was all Ryan needed. He sprinted toward the far wall, where a control panel blinked in the corner. The Queen had said that some of the challenges would test his intellect. Maybe he could find a way to disable the creature rather than fight it head-on. He reached the control panel and began to tap at the buttons, his mind working faster than his fingers. There was no time to waste. The creature was already recovering from the blow, and he had only moments before it was back on the attack. His fingers moved quickly, scanning the display in front of him. The panel was a complex maze of symbols and foreign characters, but Ryan had spent enough time studying alien technology to recognize the pattern. He punched in a sequence of commands, hoping it would work. There was a brief flicker of light, and then the creature froze, its movements locking in place. Ryan exhaled in relief, his muscles aching from the sudden burst of activity, but the battle wasn't over yet. He turned to face the creature, watching as it struggled to move. It was still alive, still dangerous, but it was no longer a threat. He had won the first challenge, not with brute strength, but with ingenuity. The Queen's voice echoed through the room once more. "Impressive, human, but this is only the beginning." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. He knew she wasn't done with him yet. As the mechanical beast powered down, the floor beneath him shifted again. He had barely registered the movement before the next challenge began. The walls around him shifted, and a low, mechanical whirring sound filled the air. Suddenly, the ground cracked open, and from below, a series of smaller, faster creatures emerged, their claws clicking against the floor as they charged toward him. Ryan cursed under his breath. These creatures were smaller than the first, but there were more of them. He could fight them off one by one, but that wouldn't work in the long run. He needed a different approach. Without hesitation, he reached for another pipe that lay nearby. This time, however, he didn't aim for the creatures directly. He swung the pipe wildly, knocking several of them off balance and causing them to stumble over one another. As they floundered, Ryan took advantage of the opening, moving quickly to avoid their attacks and disarming the ones closest to him. It wasn't just about fighting anymore, it was about surviving. He had to think fast and stay one step ahead. He ducked under a creature's claw as it swiped at him, then rolled to the side as another lunged in his direction. He grabbed a nearby piece of debris, using it as a shield to deflect their attacks. His mind worked in overdrive, constantly analyzing the situation, looking for weaknesses. Finally, after what felt like hours, the creatures slowed down, their attacks becoming more sluggish. Ryan saw an opening. With a well-placed kick, he knocked one of the creatures back into the others, sending them tumbling. He used the moment to incapacitate the rest, his body moving with a fluidity he didn't even know he possessed. It was a dance of survival, a balance between thinking and acting, reacting and planning. When the last creature fell to the ground, Ryan collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. Sweat poured down his face and his muscles ached from the constant movement, but he had done it. He had completed the second challenge, and in the process he had proven something to himself. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a survivor. The Queen's voice came again, this time softer, almost as if she were acknowledging his effort. "Well done, human." "But you're not finished yet." Ryan didn't speak. He couldn't afford to, he knew there was still more to come. The gauntlet wasn't over. But for the first time, he felt confident that he could make it through. The floor shifted again, and a new challenge began. Ryan didn't know what to expect this time, but he was ready. He had already proven that he could adapt, think on his feet, and survive. The Zephyrians may have been the most powerful species in the galaxy, but he wasn't going to let that stop him. Not today. Ryan's chest rose and fell with each heavy breath as he stood in the middle of the gauntlet, sweat dripping down his face. The room around him was eerily silent after the challenges he had already faced. The mechanical creatures had been hard enough, but now he felt like the real test was just beginning. The Queen's voice echoed through the room, her cold tone still lingering in his ears. "You have passed the tests of strength and intellect, human. But you have yet to prove your resolve. This next challenge will test your mind, your will, and your very soul." Ryan wiped the sweat from his brow and took a deep breath. He wasn't sure what the Queen had in store for him, but he wasn't about to back down now. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to let anything stop him from proving that humans were just as capable as any other species. The room began to shift again, the walls closing in as a new set of obstacles emerged from the shadows. This time there were no mechanical beasts, no strange creatures. Instead, Ryan was faced with an array of holographic screens, all displaying different scenarios. Each one looked real, too real. His heart skipped a beat as he realized what was happening. The Queen wasn't testing him with physical challenges anymore. She was testing his mind. One screen showed a planet, its surface ravaged by war. Another displayed a city on the brink of collapse, its buildings crumbling and its citizens fighting to survive. Yet another showed a peaceful village where a small group of people were living in harmony. But there was a catch. Each of these screens represented a choice. Ryan had to decide which scenario was real, which one was a lie, and which one he could save. "Choose wisely," the Queen's voice warned. "Each decision will have consequences." Ryan stepped forward, his eyes scanning each screen. The war-torn planet looked familiar, too familiar. He had seen similar scenes before in old history books from Earth, stories of conflict that led to death and destruction. But was it real? Could it be that easy? He glanced at the peaceful village on the other side. It seemed like the ideal choice, but there was something about it that didn't feel right. The people looked too calm, too perfect. It was almost as if it was an illusion meant to deceive him. As he studied the screens, Ryan's mind raced. He had always relied on logic and reason to solve problems. He had been trained to think ahead, to analyze every situation from every angle. But this was different. This was about more than just choosing the right answer. This was about understanding what the Queen was trying to teach him. She wanted him to prove that he could think beyond what was in front of him, that he could make decisions based on more than just appearances. Ryan took a deep breath, focusing his mind. He had to trust his instincts. The village, while peaceful, seemed too perfect, too unreal. The war-torn planet felt like the real world, full of suffering and pain, but also full of potential for change. The city on the brink of collapse, on the other hand, was a place of chaos, a place where survival was a daily struggle. Ryan knew that if he was going to make the right choice, he had to focus on what mattered most, the people. He turned toward the screen showing the city. It was on the edge of destruction, but it wasn't too late. The people there still had a chance to rebuild, to fight for a better future. He reached out and touched the screen, and the image shifted. The city began to change, the buildings slowly starting to repair themselves, the people working together to rebuild their world. For a moment, Ryan felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. The Queen's voice echoed once more. "Your decision has been made, human." But the real test has just begun. The room around him changed again, and this time Ryan found himself standing in a vast, empty void. There was no light, no sound, only the feeling of being utterly alone. The screens that had once surrounded him were gone, replaced by a sense of isolation that threatened to swallow him whole. He looked around, but there was nothing to see. No stars, no planets, just endless darkness. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine. This was it, the real test. This was the part where his will would be tested, where he would be forced to face his deepest fears and doubts. The Queen had been watching him, waiting for him to crack, waiting for him to give in to the darkness. But Ryan wasn't going to let that happen. He had come too far. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking in a deep breath. The emptiness was overwhelming, but it wasn't the end. He knew that. He had faced worse before. He had been through battles that had left him feeling like he couldn't go on, but he had always found a way to push through. This was no different. Ryan opened his eyes and took a step forward. The darkness didn't swallow him. It didn't consume him. Instead, the emptiness seemed to part as he moved, and slowly a small light began to appear in the distance. It was faint at first, just a flicker, but it grew brighter as he moved toward it. He didn't know what the light represented. It could have been a trick, another test designed to break him. But Ryan wasn't afraid. He knew that the only way out of the darkness was to move forward, to keep going no matter how difficult the path became. With each step, the light grew brighter, and soon Ryan found himself standing in front of a small, glowing orb. It was a symbol of hope, of perseverance. And as he reached out to touch it, he felt a warmth spread through his body, a warmth that pushed back the darkness and filled him with strength. "You have passed the test," the Queen's voice came, sounding almost impressed. "You have shown that you are more than just a survivor. You have proven that you are willing to fight for something greater than yourself." Ryan didn't speak. He simply nodded, still feeling the warmth of the light in his chest. It was a feeling he had never experienced before, one that filled him with a sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for something bigger than any individual. He was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. As the darkness faded and the light grew brighter, Ryan knew that he had earned the Queen's respect. He had proven that humans were capable of far more than just survival. They were capable of fighting for a future, of using their minds and their hearts to overcome even the most impossible odds. The Queen's voice rang out one final time. "You have completed the challenge, human. But there is still more to be done. The war is not over and your journey is far from finished. But know this, you have earned my respect, and that human is something no one else has achieved." Ryan didn't know what the future held, but he knew that this was only the beginning. The Zephyrians had tested him, pushed him to his limits, but he had come through stronger than ever. Humanity had a place in this galaxy, and Ryan Hayes was going to ensure that they fought for it. The gauntlet was not over yet, and Ryan Hayes knew that. His muscles were sore, his body bruised from the physical challenges he had already faced. Yet, despite the exhaustion weighing down on him, he felt an unwavering resolve deep inside. The trials had tested his body, his intellect, and his willpower, but he wasn't done. Not yet. As he stood in the center of the empty room, the air seemed to grow still. The usual hum of the station was absent now, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that made his heart beat louder in his chest. The light above flickered for a moment, and then, suddenly, the walls shifted once again. Ryan tensed, preparing himself for whatever came next. But this time, the room didn't change in the same way it had before. It wasn't another test of physical strength, nor was it a mental challenge that required quick thinking. This time, it felt different. The Queen's voice boomed across the room, her tone colder than ever. "You have passed the trials of strength, intellect, and will. But now you face the final challenge, the test of humanity." Ryan's brow furrowed. The test of humanity? What could that mean? He had already given everything he had, fought with everything he knew, and survived against all odds. He wasn't sure what else he could possibly prove. The floor beneath him trembled, and a bright light emerged from the ground, casting long shadows across the room. In the middle of the light, a figure began to materialize. At first, it was nothing more than a vague outline, but as it solidified, Ryan's heart skipped a beat. It was a human, just like him. But this human didn't look like anyone he knew. The figure was dressed in tattered clothing, worn and dirty as if it had come from a world ravaged by war. There was a look of desperation in the figure's eyes, and Ryan could feel the heavy weight of their pain. The figure took a step forward, and as it did, Ryan instinctively took a step back. He didn't know why, but something about the figure unsettled him. It wasn't just the appearance, it was the presence. The figure seemed to embody the suffering of countless people, and for a moment, Ryan wondered if he was facing some kind of hallucination. But no, this was real. The figure was real. The Queen's voice rang out again, cutting through Ryan's confusion. "This is your final test, human. You must choose. This person before you, they are you. They are everything that humanity has struggled with: pain, suffering, loss. You must decide, will you help them? Or will you leave them behind as the rest of the galaxy might do?" Ryan's stomach turned. His mind raced. This wasn't a challenge of strength or intellect. It was a challenge of heart. The figure in front of him was not some enemy to defeat. It wasn't a problem to solve. It was a choice that no one but him could make. Ryan looked at the figure, and for a brief moment he felt the weight of every hardship humanity had ever faced: the wars, the poverty, the loss. It was all there, reflected in the figure's eyes. He saw his own fears in them, his own struggles. The human spirit wasn't just about surviving. It was about enduring, about finding the strength to keep going even when there seemed to be no way forward. The figure reached out a hand toward Ryan, and he instinctively stepped forward, his own hand trembling. This was what the Queen wanted him to understand, to see humanity not as a species that had conquered the stars, but as a species that had faced unimaginable odds and still chosen to fight. This was the true test. It wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about empathy, about recognizing the suffering of others and choosing to act. Ryan reached out, taking the figure's hand. The moment their hands touched, a flood of emotions washed over him: fear, sorrow, hope, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The figure wasn't just a symbol of human suffering. It was a symbol of what humanity had the potential to become. This was the true strength of humanity, the ability to endure and grow, to help one another, to never give up even when the galaxy seemed determined to crush them. As Ryan held the figure's hand, the room seemed to change. The bright light around them faded, and the figure's appearance began to shift. The rags on their body turned into simple, clean clothing. The sorrow in their eyes softened, replaced by a sense of peace. The tension in Ryan's body eased, and he felt something inside him shift. The challenge had not been about defeating a foe, nor had it been about proving his physical strength. It had been about proving humanity's strength to empathize, to choose the path of compassion, even when the galaxy was full of cold indifference. The Queen's voice echoed in the room, softer now, as if she were finally acknowledging something important. You have chosen human. You have proven that humanity is capable of far more than just survival. You are capable of compassion, of understanding. You have passed the final test. Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The figure before him smiled, a genuine smile that seemed to light up the room. They nodded to him in gratitude, and slowly they began to fade, disappearing into the light that had once surrounded them. Ryan was left standing alone in the room, but he didn't feel alone. Something inside him had changed, something deep and irrevocable. He understood now that the true strength of humanity wasn't in the power to destroy or conquer, but in the ability to endure and help one another. The Queen's form appeared before him, her sharp eyes studying him intently. You have passed the test, human, she said. Her tone was still cold, but there was something else there now, respect. I did not expect you to choose empathy. I did not expect you to choose compassion. It is a trait I did not believe your species possessed, but I have seen now that I was wrong. Ryan stood tall, meeting her gaze without flinching. He knew this was more than just a personal victory. This was humanity's victory. He had shown the Queen, the Zephyrians, and the galaxy that humans were more than just survivors. They were more than just warriors. They were a species that could rise above their challenges, that could face adversity and still choose the path of hope. And that, he realized, was the greatest strength of all. The Queen's expression softened slightly, though it was still hard to read. I will grant your species what you have earned, Captain Hayes, she said. The alliance between the Zephyrians and humanity will now be sealed. You have proven that humanity is worthy of its place among the stars. Ryan didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been earned. And he would continue to fight, not just for survival, but for the future, a future where humanity's greatest strength would be its compassion.